This week on Diabetes Connections, when we hear about exciting tech developments and amazing soon-to-come diabetes advances, it's good to get the facts. I'm excited as anybody else for what the future will bring, but we got to keep this stuff in perspective. I'm talking to David Kliff, the publisher of the Diabetic Investor. He was diagnosed with type 1 as an adult in 1996, and he's written and consulted about diabetes business ever since. I wanted to talk to David about what he saw at two big tech conferences that happened in January. I should probably warn you, I call David the dream killer, but he's not entirely cynical. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am always so glad to have you here. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and my son was diagnosed with type 1 back in 2006, right before he turned 2. He is now 20. My husband lives with type 2. I don't have any kind of diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting, TV, and radio news, and that is how you get the podcast. I did get a note recently from somebody who said, "Why do you say that at the start of almost every episode? We know who you are after 10 years. And I think that's a great question. But I was taught in broadcasting there is no presumed knowledge. And we do have new listeners come in all the time. And I don't know about you, but when I listen to a podcast, there's nothing worse than thinking you know what's going on and turning the show on and not being sure. And I like to know when people talking about diabetes live with it or do not, or are healthcare providers or are not. I do try to keep it pretty quick, but yeah, that's pretty much there to stay in the beginning. Looking ahead to the calendar, a couple of things coming up I want to make sure you know all about. Mom's Night Out Cleveland is coming up very fast. That is February 21st and 22nd. Super excited for this one. Quick turnaround from Atlanta. I do have a couple of promo codes and specials floating around out there. If you're interested, you don't see a discount code, please let me know. I'll make sure you get all the information that you need. But hurry, registration for that one is going to be closing soon. And our next Mom's Night Out is not until September. That one's in Minneapolis and will be in Phoenix in October. We're doing another bitch session. Yeah, that's coming up in late February. This was my favorite webinar of 2024, and it was our biggest by far. I do webinars occasionally with my friend Anna Sabino. She is a CDCES who lives with type 1 and runs Finding Smiles Coaching. The bitch session is for moms of kids with type 1. It's not just about complaining. It can be really healthy to clear the air. And last time, this turned into a great community advice session with some moms helping other moms through things they'd been through. And then we connected people locally. There were a couple people in Delaware that lived like 20 minutes away from each other and didn't know anybody else. It was great. So you can join us February 25th at 8 p.m. It will be recorded, but you have to sign up to get the recording. And then finally, March 7th, I will be in New Jersey for the Breakthrough T1D Summit. I'm their opening keynote. I'm going to be debuting a brand new presentation about our 18 plus years with type 1. And I think this is a presentation that, I know it'll resonate with parents, but I think it'll resonate with adults with type 1 as well. And we're going to be going through the technology. It's very hard for me to believe that the technology that we started out with seems old-fashioned to lots of people now. And it really is. But I'm kind of excited to take people through our technology journey as well as everything else and all the mistakes that have happened in the last 18 years. Okay, this week I am talking to David Kliff. And, speaking of technology, I wanted to talk about some of the technology that I had seen and heard about at the Consumer Electronics Show at CES and at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. These two events happened in January. You probably saw a few things maybe about non-invasive glucose monitoring. I'm not sure that anything really big broke through this year, but I think it's really important for us in the community to not only debunk some of this stuff, but to give each other the tools to recognize when it is bunk and what questions to ask to delve deeper into whether these are tools that anybody's actually going to use. So David Kliff is an internationally recognized diabetes business consultant, analyst, speaker, and the publisher of the Diabetic Investor. He was diagnosed as an adult back in the 90s. He's had a podcast. If you don't already follow him on LinkedIn, you should definitely do that. He posts a lot there with really good information. As I said in that opening, I have called David the dream killer. I think it's also fair, and I don't think he would be insulted if I called him a little bit of a curmudgeon. But I think that with all of the breathless reporting about amazing developments, it's really good to keep our feet on the floor sometimes about this stuff. I remain hopeful. And as you'll hear, so does David. Our conversation is right after this. I love when I don't have to deal with a faraway mail order system, when I can just pick up diabetes supplies from the pharmacy. Omnipod is the only tubeless full-feature insulin pump available through the pharmacy. It makes it simple to pick up pods and insulin in the same place, and you avoid those high startup costs from traditional tubed insulin pumps. You simply pay as you pod. Remember, pharmacy means no commitment, and pharmacy means you can switch now, even if your tubed pump is under warranty. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions, visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. David, welcome to Diabetes Connections. I'm excited to talk to you, find out what you saw, what was good, what was garbage. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Doing awesome. Another great day in diabetes world.
Right? Never a dull moment. Let's start by talking about CES, which used to be called Consumer Electronics Show. I think now they just call it CES. When I looked at what was on tap for diabetes, it looked to me like it was all about non-invasive glucose monitoring, which does not get me excited. What did you see when you were there?
Yeah, that's the reason I kind of went. That remains the holy grail of diabetes. I've been doing this so long that first it was no finger stick, and then it was now that everybody's using CGM. It's okay. We want a CGM that doesn't stick you in the body. And in interest of full disclosure, I use the G7 with my Omnipod 5. I happen to love the system, and I also have the belief that non-invasive is something that is not needed. There's no unmet medical need for a non-invasive glucose monitor, whether it's continuous or just point to point. What I just didn't shock me when I got there, ring companies are a big deal, like a really big deal. Dexcom has this deal with Aura, and I did a lot of my due diligence before I went to the show because unlike everybody else who attends, I like to know what the hell I'm talking about. Rings are really now becoming a big deal. So the philosophy is, and I write about this all the time, it's not the data, okay? There are a gazillion ways to get data. It's turning that data into information the patient understands, that the patient can act upon, so they will continue to use the toy that they have. If you look at the Dexcom Aura deal just for modeling purposes, the goal that both Dexcom and Abbott have, because Abbott has the Lingo, Dexcom has the Stelo. The goal that they have is not just to transform that data into actionable information, but to combine their data with other data so that a patient can make more intelligent decisions.
Are there more rings than Aura that you saw? This is not the only brand of ring.
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't swing a dead cat without in a ring company.
Okay.
It was like, oh my God. It's like, yeah. So this is almost hysterical, funny, ironic, whatever you want to call it. My first day in the show is divided into exhibits and presentations. And the show also takes up like all of Las Vegas. It's not just one convention center. It's kind of all over the place. So what they've done over the years, and this is, I think, a very smart thing, like healthcare and wellness is now pretty much based at the Venetian Convention Center. So that's where I spent most of my time. So I walk in, and like one of the first companies that I walked and talked to was, it was a ring company. They said they had a ring that can measure glucose. Now I can't resist this because I know the damn thing doesn't work. So I go up to the booth and I start talking to the young lady. I did take some pictures because I needed to share with my friends so we'd have a good laugh. So I was talking to her and asking her how this ring measured glucose. And basically what I figured out was it was a wild ass guess. And I said, well, okay, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but if you are guessing at a number, what good is it? I mean, come on. For somebody who doesn't have diabetes, if the number shows up at 100 and you're really 200, what are you going to do about it?
What was your number? Did you, was it crazy off?
Oh, I didn't even try it. They are prototypes.
Oh, they won't even let you try it.
Oh, no. God forbid. No, then you'd find out the damn thing doesn't work.
That's funny.
We can't have any of that. And there's also the other thing that almost all of these companies not only have rings, they have watches. They're not Apple Watches, but they're, kind of like an Apple Watch. You see this, excuse me, on an Instagram, you see all these ads, to talk about glucose on a watch.
It's interesting about the rings because my son was diagnosed in late 2006. And it was in those first couple of months where, your friends are sending you all the information. Anybody sees the word diabetes and like, I'm going to help Stacy. We're going to help Benny, this little toddler. And a bunch of my friends sent me a ring that was in development that would measure your blood glucose. And of course, this was almost 20 years ago. And at the time, I remember thinking, that's great. I'll look at that later. Like, I cannot even imagine the future. But, and I've told this story a bunch, David, I was also a health reporter before I did this podcast, and I covered the Gluco Watch in the 90s, before I knew
Oh,
anything
God,
about
yeah.
diabetes.
I wore the glucose watch.
All right. Well, then you know that most of the people who wore it did not enjoy being burned by it. Was that your experience?
Oh my God, you're taking me way back in the way back machine. So what happened was, I think it was John Hodgman, if I remember his name correctly, was running Cygnus, who made the Gluco watch. And I told him during an interview that I wanted to try it. And he said, yes, I'll let you try it. One of the perks of being me, I get to try all this stuff. Okay, I will go back and say this, and I do believe this. Dexcom and Abbott owe Cygnus a huge amount of gratitude because I was at the FDA meeting, I believe it was in Gaithersburg, where they were reviewing the Gluco watch.
Hmm.
I wasn't a big believer in it. I knew about the burning, I knew about all the issues. However, as I'm fond of saying, good comes out of bad, it did set the rules. It kind of gave a blueprint to Dexcom and Abbott saying, okay, if you are going to develop a continuous glucose monitor, these are the things you have to have. And I remember when the Navigator, okay, now, this is the same time frame, the Navigator was actually a pretty good device. The technology didn't screw up Navigator. Abbott did, okay? And I also remember that, like, again, in the very early days, I mean, I even wore Medtronic had a sensor. Now, this is a really long time ago that I also wore, but the data was blinded.
Right. Yeah.
Meaning, and I remember they came to my office. I wore it, and they came to my office to download the data or whatever. I mean, and that thing didn't work either. Nothing new there. But fundamentally and structurally, those efforts led to the new efforts that we have today. The problem that we have, okay, and this is, I mean, I've been doing this way too long. My meter is very low, but the problem almost every one of these non-invasive efforts have, and I don't care if it's non-invasive single point or continuous, I don't. All these different methods that they try, because there's only so many ways to measure glucose. It's not like baking a cake, All of these efforts look really good in the beginning. It's only until you go down the road that you find out it really doesn't work. You can't replicate it. You can't scale it. I was at a technology conference. Oh, God, it happened to me in San Diego, actually, but a long time ago. And a guy from one of the companies said, yes, we can make a great non-invasive glucose monitor, but I don't think any patient's going to pay $5,000 for it,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but what happens is the lifeblood of all of these companies is money. Without money, they can't do what they're doing. A lot of investors, in spite of voluminous data, will come along and think, okay, yep, somebody solved the problem,
Right.
and they throw money at them. It's almost like a cycle. There was a company at CES, and it's a startup company. The idea came out of MIT. Nice people, young people. You could tell very smart. And the young lady and I were having a discussion about how it worked. Now, I could tell this woman was intelligent. There's, no question. She shows me the device, which I can't tell you how large, but it was big. And I'm thinking, oh my God, these guys really think somebody's going to wear that. I'm a diabetic. I live with the damn disease. And not only am I diabetic, but when I talk to other diabetics, we speak the same language. I have yet to meet somebody wearing a CGM who has told me that it's painful. Dexcom and Abbott have spent millions of dollars to develop insertion devices, which are easy to use. And let's be honest, it really isn't that painful.
Right.
I mean, I tell people it's more painful in the old days when I used to stick my fingers.
Yeah.
This is, boom, you're on and you're done.
Yeah.
Which is part of my premise of why I think non-invasive is kind of a pipe dream because it's not really needed. The goal in diabetes technology, in my opinion, should be to make my life easier. There's been enormous improvement. I mean, my first insulin pump, I believe, was a 508, a Minimed 508. I believe that's what my first one was. I've been on the Basal IQ. I tried it, before the Control IQ came out. I loved it. I just don't like being wired. So I keep looking for technology to make my life easier. That's what the goal is to me. And I also believe that technology will only take you so far, meaning that most people don't understand that algorithms learn. So software really has become almost more important than hardware. Most people don't realize that a pump really just does what it's told. It's a computer. It does what it is told to do. As my old college professor said, garbage in, garbage out. Like there was a session that I found actually pretty interesting talking about nutrition in the Ozempic age
Hmm.
as part of the presentation. And this didn't surprise or shock me because I've written about it, is how to use glucose data to improve nutrition.
Right.
Now, I was in football yesterday and I saw that my first ad for the lingo, the Abbott lingo, I thought it was an excellent ad because it talked about how a normal non-diabetic person, I won't call them normal, but non-diabetic, how they could use this data to eat better. And they did it in a very non-condescending way. A lot of the discussion at the conference, the good stuff that came out of the conference was when the panelists would talk about basically all the different pieces to the puzzle
Hmm. Okay.
and using artificial intelligence to help you.
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about with that. Let me bring you back, though, if I could. One of the items I was looking at CES was this device called Isaac, which is a breath
Oh,
measurement.
yeah. Oh,
Did
the
you see
breathing
that?
one.
Yeah. All right. So tell me about
Is
that one.
that the breath one?
That's the only
That's
one
where
they
you're
sent me a
breathing?
press release about. So Isaac is the name of the
Okay.
thing.
All
I
right.
think
Okay.
Prevent
Well,
is the name of the company. Right back to our conversation. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. Benny has been using the Dexcom CGM for more than 10 years now. The first insertion was in 2013, just before he turned 9. It was great then. I mean, if you had done finger sticks for a while, you know how amazing it is to go from that to continuous glucose monitoring. But it's even better now. The Dexcom CGM systems just keep improving. They continue to get more and more accurate with no finger sticks or scanning required. The easy push button insertion has made it easy for Benny to do it himself. He has done every one since we switched to the G6 in 2018, which was great for his independence back then as a younger teen. And of course, we still love the alerts and alarms and that we can set them how we want. Find out more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. If your glucose alerts and readings from the G6 do not match symptoms or expectations, use a blood glucose meter to make diabetes treatment decisions.
okay. Thank you for reminding me. Oh, my God. So they didn't send me a press release. I found them on LinkedIn. And I don't know, I have a pretty big following on LinkedIn, whatever. And so I'm like, okay, I have to see this. I finally find the booth. And the guy is wearing like he's got it on a, thing.
Like a lanyard.
Yeah, so I said, "Can I, look and touch it, feel it?" He says, "Well, it's a prototype." Okay, I still wanna touch it, feel it, whatever. And I start talking to him. Now, believe me, this is not the first breath glucose thing that I've heard of. I won't even go to the popsicle thing that I heard of years ago. That was a fun one. I started asking him some, basic questions, and I said, "Well, are you in clinical trials?" "Yep, we're in early stage clinical." Great. Where are you doing that? Doing them at the University of Indiana, which I felt really proud of because my daughter went to school there and my money went there. And this is kind of the game these companies play. They can't disclose anything. And then he kind of like with a wink and a nod said, "Yeah, CVS was just here looking at us." And I said, "Well, can you give me an idea how much it's going to cost?" He said, "Yeah, $400." I said, "Excuse me? How much is it going to cost?" He said $400. And he said, that's a one-time cost, $400. Now, I didn't want to embarrass the gentleman, so I'm thinking to myself, because I know the hurdles that are going to prevent this thing from ever getting to market. So the woman who was behind this effort must have overheard our conversation, came over, started talking to me. When I say this is early stage, this is majorly early stage. Like their clinical trial had maybe 10 people in it, maybe. Do I think it's going to work? No. Do I think it's going to get FDA approval? Absolutely not. Again, with a breath analysis, I don't think they realize the hurdle they need to overcome. There are people who still smoke. So you got to worry about that, what you eat.
Well, there's ketone
It,
breath monitors. I don't know how well those work, but those are measuring something different.
yeah, show me one patient who can tell me what a ketone is.
My
You know,
audience can tell you. We have a very smart audience. Come on.
okay, well, then there's a few. It's like the Marines, a few in a crowd. But for the masses where you're making money,
Right. I know. Well, and
oh,
I won't
the,
jump ahead. I'm going to put a pin in that because if we have time, I'm going to bring you back to ketone monitoring because I'm hearing
yeah, but
off the record that by the end of this year, Abbott, Dexcom, we're going to be talking about ketone monitoring through these CGMs. Not
okay.
necessarily that it's going to happen and be FDA approved, but that's where they're going to start pushing the conversation because once you have the over the counter ones, look, you're making all sorts of faces. All right, we'll do it now. What do you think of that in the next frontier for CGM?
I got to be really careful because I know what's going on internally at both companies.
You can say no comment. I won't mind.
No, I want to put this the right way. Before I even talk about this, I have to say this first. I divide the diabetic world into three very distinct groups. There's about 15% of the patient base who are like me. I get it. I'm engaged with it. I understand it. I'm down with it. I know what's going on. There's another 20%. They're so disengaged, will never be engaged. They almost live their life like they don't have diabetes. They don't really give. So in the middle, this big middle. So there's like 65% of the patient base. They have diabetes. They know they have diabetes. They want to do something about their diabetes. They live by the mantra that I'm going to live with, not for my diabetes. I want diabetes to be part of my life. I don't want it to run my life. That's my target market. If I was coming up with a whiz bang way cool toy, okay, excuse me, that's who I wanted. Why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. So the problem that we have with ketones is in that big swath of patients, they think ketones is a way to get into their apartment. They don't know what a ketone is. I don't blame them, okay, because, okay, again, I can't use my experience with a doctor because doctors actually want to see me because I help them make money. But in the world that normal people live in, you don't have that much time with your doctor. Think about how many exams these people go through where they even get to your feet.
Let's say in a world in which we understand that most people don't know what ketones are and don't care about ketones. My question still stands, David. These companies have so much money. You saw a commercial for Lingo. They do a Super Bowl ad. They say, here's what ketones are. Now they've changed the conversation.
That's a canyon that won't be crossed. It's too complicated.
Oh, I
It's
disagree
not,
with you. We can
well,
have that argument.
I believe in the KISS principle. Keep it short and stupid. That's why A1C works. Any idiot can understand A1C. 7 or above is bad, 7 or below is good. Time and range is a more important data point to me than ketones. I agree they will use ketones in the investment community because those analysts are dumber than a box of hammers and they'll be impressed and think it's a way to differentiate the product. I don't really give a shit about. And the reality is we are dangerously close to what I call data overload, which is a huge problem because the normal person, you reach a point of no return. What happens? They tune out. So what's the goal here? And this is maybe where I think differently. My goal here is how do I turn that person who is, let's say, I'll use my own kids as an example. I have twins, they're 39 years old. I have a boy and a girl. How do I turn my daughter from an occasional user of the Stello to a continual user? Using that thing once isn't going to help you a lot. I mean, you'll learn a lot, but from Dexcom's perspective, they want you to keep buying that thing. That's where they make money. And to me, this business is all about money. This is not about making me better, not about making you better. It's about money. There was a great discussion, and this is part of like the ketone thing. A guy from Samsung, Samsung has a lot going on, but I loved his thought process. Not sure it can happen. He said, We really need to come up with one number. We take all these other numbers and come up with one number that says, this is how you're doing today. It's not easy to do. But
I think if it's,
theoretically, a
I
patient,
disagree. I think if it's meaningful enough, people will want to do it. I mean, we can disagree. We'll see what happens in the next coming years. Let's bring it back to CES. Did you see anything you got excited about? Is there anything to be optimistic about here?
yeah, I'll tell you what I was optimistic about. I was not optimistic about anything on the exhibit hall. I'll just tell you that straightforward. I mean, it's a great laugh, and I always can use a good chuckle. But I really enjoyed the discussion now and how it's changed because we have what I call a convergence of forces here. I know the guys who write the algorithm. I know what they can and I know what they can't do and I know what they want them to do. I walked away feeling really good because I see the power of using artificial intelligence. Listen, I'm 63 years old. My mind doesn't work that well, but artificial intelligence combined with the right data sets, one of my dreams, and I hope I live to see this, I would love a device that slap it on, turn it on, and forget about it.
Right.
I love my Omnipod 5. I will also say that I'm not a person who I don't care if I'm in tight control. I do a lot of things diabetics shouldn't do, yet I'm doing really well because I do other things. I'm a triathlete, all that stuff. But in the hands of an informed patient, this data could be tremendously powerful. Yeah, we have a shot at slap it on, turn it on. Now,
Mm.
there's, listen, certain things that we can't do. And well, we could do, but they won't be done for commercial reasons. Like I used to tell people in Omnipod, sell me a pre-filled pot. Please sell me a pre-filled pot. I don't want to have to fill the damn thing. Not because I'm lazy, because I got to worry about the bubbles but commercially, that's not doable. We are heading to the day, especially for a type 1, and especially for an intensive insulin user, where their life is going to be a lot better if they choose to accept the mission, I guess.
So you're talking about a pump
Uh,
with you wouldn't need any mealtime boluses and no corrections. You just like put it
you wouldn't
on.
have, yeah, you'd put it on, you'd pick up your smartphone, boom, there it goes, and you don't have to do anything. And I'll give you a really good example of this. Since I am a triathlete and I train a lot, all the newer pumps have these kind of features. But like on the Omnipod 5, they have an activity mode. Okay, I literally have to tell it. Like today when I ride, I'll probably only ride like 25 or 30 miles. Not a big deal, but I have to tell it I'm doing that.
Right.
In the future, you won't say that. In the future, I'm from Chicago. I love deep dish pizza. Pizza is a nightmare for a type 1 diabetic. In the future, I won't even think about what I'm eating. That's the potential. I mean, because this stuff is like way cool. I mean, way above my pay grade. And yes, because you're gathering all this data, it's being collected in one place, regurgitated, and it's done in real time. Now, your listeners need to know this. This is really, really important because it gets ignored, but it is very important. There is no fast acting insulin that works fast enough. We aren't going to get one either. The money is no longer in an insulin. Lilly and Novo are legacy companies. They're not going to spend a dime to develop a faster acting insulin. So here's the problem. Okay, this is where the kind of the rubber meets the road. This technology, quite honestly, is outstanding and amazing. But because of the way insulin acts, it's a problem. So for those people who believe that we're going to have a completely closed loop system, I'm not so sure about that. And it's nothing to do with the hardware or the software, but and I don't know if your listeners understand that I have like 8 vials of insulin sitting in my refrigerator. Okay, I have good insurance. I get a lot of insulin. Each one of those vials could be different.
Right.
The way that insulin acts can be different. And then my body, the human factor. Now, I don't have stress like I did when I was, 25. And if you have a audience that's type 1, there might be some fresher users who are in there. And even though I don't believe in inhaled insulin, I do believe in that insulin for one specific purpose. It's in, it's out, and it's done. If you were to turn a fresher, and I used to talk to Al Mann about this when he was alive. I said, Al, if that was a liquid insulin, you wouldn't be a billionaire. You'd be a billionaire twice over. But my point is, that's the weak link in the chain.
Yeah, but it was interesting. There are people out there who have in the DIY systems who are operating with completely closed loop systems. I know them personally, and they're getting really good time in range, like over 75%, 80% time in
Right.
range. So I
Because
hear what you're saying, but it seems like it's
so here,
possible.
so this is where this is why the software has become so important. Good software makes up for that weak link in the chain.
Yeah.
And again, some of this might be a definition of terms. Like I said, my goal is slap it on, turn it on, and don't even think about it. That's it. I know people that are using what they call it the loop or whatever.
No, I'm not
I
talking
don't want
about loop. I'm talking about completely closed, no bolus, eating corn
yeah.
dogs.
So yeah. Hey, I like corn dogs. Who doesn't? And I agree. There's always been people that can do that. But again, I don't think in that world. I think in the masses.
Right. How do you
You know,
scale it?
how do you commercialize? How do you scale it?
Got it.
I tell people all the time, Insulet is not a pump company. It's a soda pop company because they have to make millions of these freaking things.
So, David, we've spent most of this interview with you telling us things don't work and things you're cynical about and, killing the dream. A little bit of hope here at the end. I mean, I'm teasing, of course, because you are an optimistic person, I think, at heart. Is there anything else that you've got your eye on?
Yeah, I'm watching the evolution of the dynamic between GLP-1s and the entire diabetes populations. I can't tell you how many people I know who are type 1s who are not supposed to be using it, who are, or are getting outcomes of a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I don't think people understand just how impactful these drugs have been to areas they wouldn't even think of. Going back to our discussion earlier about insulin development, well, you can forget that. And that's all because of GLP-1s. Lilly and Novo are making billions of dollars. These are outstanding drugs. You know a drug is good when some person comes into their endo's office or doctor and says, put me on this drug. And they don't care if you inject.
That's the thing. Yes. That's
Yeah.
when you know,
Well,
when you.
I don't know if you know, I lost my wife 12 years ago. I'm a widower. I no longer tell women what I do for a living. The reason is because the minute I tell them what I do for a living, they say, can you get me Ozempic? I'm like,
Oh
oh,
my
no.
God. That's amazing.
Here's the last thing that really excites me. It does. We are at a really good point. And you got to remember, when I talk about technology, I don't just think of hardware. I really think of software. Software and artificial intelligence, we are heading to some really cool places. But when I look at this all, the best thing that's come out of all of this, in my opinion, is we are thinking about it differently. Meaning that my mother, unfortunately, was heavy her entire life. It did end up killing. Now, if my mom were alive today, she'd be on one of these drugs. The conversation has changed. The best example that I can give when I was first diagnosed with diabetes. Now, we're going way back in the way back machine here.
But you were diagnosed
I've been,
as an adult, right? Or no?
I was diagnosed, I was 31 years old, so 32 years ago.
Okay.
I was with my wife. We were at a restaurant, sitting at the bar. Some guy must have overheard our conversation. And I was freaked. I didn't know, like most patients, didn't know what the hell this was. Guy comes up at us holding a scotch. Ah, I've been diabetes for years. It's nothing.
Oh my
And
God.
Deb looked at, he goes, maybe we should buy the guy another drink. Maybe tell us heart disease isn't a problem. you know? But anyway, but the thing I do like most is the thought process is different. And when you change the thought process, you change the outcomes. I do believe, because I also believe in the vanity factor. People aren't going to wear CGM to keep weight off. I believe that in my heart, and I know they will.
Well, I guess to bring it back to type 1, though, David, do you feel like we're going to see clinical trials and push for people with type 1 to take it? Because it is my top goal for my son's diabetes management this year. I can get the prescription,
Well,
but I
I
can't get the insurance
don't
coverage.
know how, Rick. No, but I know how. I said I know
But
how
we
all
shouldn't
these
have to
people are
sneak
doing.
around to get it. My question, do you think it's on the horizon that people with type 1, for whom it was already showing so much value? I mean, last year at ADA, that was a huge topic, was people with type 1 being able to get these drugs.
Well, listen. As my brother would say, I'm in violent agreement with you. I think there's no reason we shouldn't have it for type 1s. It's not like we're going to a speakeasy. It's not like we're speaking. All the endos I talk to, and I talk to a lot of endos, obviously. The way they sneak around is that, they don't prescribe you Mounjaro, they put you on Zepbound.
Or they
And the
diagnose you
insurance
with
will
type
cover.
2.
I have actively encouraged type 1s that I know to get on the drug. Now, I don't need it. Like me personally, weight is not my problem. I need to lose weight, I get on my bike. I'm burning 2,000 calories on a bike ride. But yes, for a lot of people,
Okay,
they
I
will.
know we're getting way too long, but I guess from an investor point of view, since these companies,
Oh,
like you said, Novo and Lilly, they don't need to make need to make any more money, never stopped anybody. But the type 1 population isn't necessarily big enough to move the needle. So that's my concern.
No,
Is will we see any
no, yeah,
research, any money spent to show that people with type 1 should have
no,
insurance coverage?
no. Well, I would say it's unlikely. If you had any shot at all, it's going to come out of Novo.
Mm,
They study how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They love to study shit. But commercially, no, it will not move the needle. You can even make the argument, and it would hurt them in the insulin side because every patient I know who's added a GLP-1 to their regimen is using much less insulin. I still encourage it because their outcomes are phenomenal. Here's what you may see, and it is possible that a third party, MIT, Harvard, something, will do this independently and study, and publish it. I can tell you what the results are going to be. It's going to be great.
right.
But no, it does. The type 1 population is not large enough to move that needle. If you were asking me which companies I'd want a type 1 to invest in right now, I'd tell them, buy Tandem, buy Dexcom, stay away from Medtronic. I don't consider Abbott a pure diabetes play. It's not like buying Tandem. That's all they do is make insulin pumps. It's not like Dexcom. All they do is glucose sensors. I would also warn them that there are a lot of wannabes in the world. They look good. They feel good. They don't really taste too good. But because a lot of us, and listen, I don't know a type 1 who hasn't had days of frustration, that feeling that I really wish I didn't have this. I'm sure your son has had days. And listen, I've had it forever, and I'm under great control, and my entire life. But
Right.
yeah, there are days I'm pissed. But I do, if there's any hope, I think because of the technology, I think the future is going to be very bright. I think we will have the ability to make much better decisions. Again, this is not a hardware thing anymore. This is a software thing.
Well, David, thank you so much for talking to me about all of this. It's always fun to talk to
Anytime.
you. I really appreciate it, and we'll continue to get your dream killing observation on the non-invasive glucose monitoring as the time goes on. But really, David, thanks so much for joining
Well,
me.
I'll tell you right now, we'll never see that in my lifetime, and I plan on living a long time.
More information about David and the Diabetic Investor. We didn't even really talk about what he does there, but I will link up all of the information over at diabetes-connections.com. Just click on this episode's homepage, and you will have everything you need. All right, long interview there, so I will just say thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.